So hi there, this is Jenny Clark with Solvability, and today's GovCon Summit. We're having such a great day, and Josh Frank with RSM Federal is going to give us more insight on how to respond to sources sought. Josh, take it away.
Awesome. All right, let's do that initial verification. Jenny, you can hear my voice and you see my slide.
Yes, I can.
Excellent. All right, so welcome back, everybody. I will say it again. Thank you for spending the end of your day with me today. For those of you that attended yesterday, welcome back. For those of you first time, good to talk to you. And what we're going to be talking about today is responding to a source of sought and how you ghost your responses in order to influence the acquisition. And this is for those of you that have never heard me personally talk about how you respond to a source of sought, this will be so eye-opening. It will change everything you do when it comes to a source of sought. Now, I do go off on tangents. I go down the rabbit hole. That's normal. Some people like it. Others, it annoys the heck out of them. But that's how I present. Excuse me. Nowhere else in this presentation am I going to talk about the difference between an RFI and a source of sought. I am, in fact, talking about sources sought. Okay. The difference is a source of sought is a small business marketing and research tool. Okay. That means when you see sources sought on Beta SAM, soon to be SAM in the NMA, that is for small businesses. And RFI, that's a request for information. It is not the same as a source of sought. Sometimes the government may try to use them interchangeably, and it happens. But an RFI is used, a request for information is used when an organization, an agency, a command is attempting to procure a product or service that is new to it, that it has not utilized before, or that organization or that contracting office. Source of sought, it's specific small business. Now, real quick, for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm managing partner for RSM Federal, and we are a B2B company. We've got, I don't know, a half a dozen coaches, and we've worked with over 10,000 companies. We help small businesses and entrepreneurs and mid-sized companies win government contracts by teaching them tactics, strategies, and process. I'm also manager for Veteran Warehouse Supply, and we sell to the government. We've won 4 contracts, actually all with the VA in the last 4 months. But I'm here today from an RSM Federal perspective. I am a professional speaker. I am an author. I'm also a coach. I've been in the market 30 years. I'm ex-military. I'm ex-Army. So for all you Army people, any of you that are former Marine Corps or Navy, I'm looking at you, Emily. I try to keep up with me today. My brother's in the Navy, so I'd like to give him trouble. Huge small business advocate. If you're a veteran, I'm chairman of the board for the Veterans Advocacy Foundation in the Midwest, and I specialize in tactic and strategy. In other words, you've probably been told, a gazillion things in terms of what you need to do to win a government contract. Well, guess what? You're not going to win because of everything you've been told. You're going to win because you know how to apply it. Okay. And that's part of my specialty, is how you apply and build a market strategy that actually wins contracts. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Expectations, basic to advanced. There is going to be some advanced today. I didn't have advanced yesterday. It was more intermediate. Today, there is going to be some advanced content. The core focus for all of you that are attending today, I want you to bridge government sales with overall business strategy. Okay. There is a very good reason why Mike Lejeune and I are business partners and why we run RSM Federal, because we're both very centric on the business side, right? And so if you haven't seen any of Mike's sessions, make sure you do. My success as a speaker today, as a trainer, is if I can make only one of you think differently about how to approach the federal space, then I will have succeeded. If I can convince just one of you to ghost requirements into your source of SOT responses, I will have succeeded. And I'm going to be talking about what those pieces are in just a moment. This is about a 1 hour session that will go approximately 1 hour and a half because I never stay on time and there's always lots of Q&A, but I will do my best to move fairly quickly. Okay. Before we get started, let's do a refresh on the basics. Most smaller companies and even a lot of mid-sized companies, the majority of their time is spent after an RFP is released, okay? And then you have time positioning with your prospect in the government. You're working with your teaming and partners or building a teaming strategy, and then you're responding to source of SOT, right? That 5% there. And that's what this session is about today. If you successfully want to win government contracts, you have to flip this chart. 80% of your time cannot be simply responding to RFPs. 80% of your time needs to be pre-acquisition. It needs to be before the RFP or the RFQ is released to the market. Okay. So if you look at these two and you say, yeah, I'm in the top one right now, guess what? That's okay. That's normal. That's normal. What I'm teaching here is not what the majority of the market is teaching you. You can be sure that the majority of small business offices, small business counselors, PTACs, even the paid coaches and consultants, folks that do what I do, the majority are not focused in getting your mindset and your strategy focused on the pre-acquisition side. Okay. So we're level setting. Responding to source of SOTs is still only 5% of your overall overarching business strategy. But I do want to make sure you understand if you want to consistently and successfully win government contracts, whether they are micro purchase at 10,000 and less, 250,000 at SAP. And I've got some other feedback on simplified acquisition. If the folks that asked last session are still here, say that for Q&A. But regardless, anyway, responding to source of SOT is critically important, and we're going to go through today why. Acquisition process. First, before we even go into source of SOT, how do you influence an acquisition? Okay. If you think about it, if you look at the RFPs, RFQs that you are trying to respond to or you review, how many of you, right? You can yell at your computer screen, and I'll make believe I hear you. How many of you have read a solicitation and said, there's no way I'm going after this. This is obviously wired for another company. This looks like it was written for another company, right? Very, very common. The reason why that happened is because they're spending 80% of their time in pre-acquisition. They're building relationships. They're collecting market intelligence. They're engaging in discussions with their potential buyers, with their prospects. Okay. So how do you wire contracts for your company versus others? Well, RFI, source of SOT, government meetings, talking to the government. This is how you position and influence an acquisition. If you're not talking to them, you're not going to be able to influence. It's common sense. Now, a reminder, you know how you guys always see solicitations that have Q&A, period, right? Question and answers. You need to make sure you understand that if you take, I'm going to be teaching you some strategies today. Make sure that you're utilizing those strategies in pre-acquisition. Why? Because the government is not allowed to share any of the discussions or information, or they don't have to, with other contractors, other companies. But if you are on the side, if the government has moved into the acquisition phase and they have released an RFP, RFQ, if you take the strategies I'm teaching you today and you attempt to influence the acquisition after this RFP, RFQ is dropped, you're giving away your strategy, because the government is required by regulation to share all discussions and questions and answers and comments, anything in that, any involvement they have with other companies, they're going to have to share. So this is like me foot stomping, saying, okay, I'm going to teach you these strategies on responding to a source of SOT, but if you take these strategies and use them anywhere else in pre-acquisition or anywhere else in acquisition, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. This will make more sense as we go through. How do you influence pre-acquisition, right? I'm not even talking source of SOT at this point. In general, from a generic business perspective, we know that if we can influence an acquisition, we're more likely to win it, right? This is business. It's not simply government. Well, how do you do it? One, teaming with other companies. The more you team, the more information you're going to gain about the market. Okay. When you're teaming with other companies, those other companies that have contracts with other agencies or commands, military commands, they're going to have information. They'll likely share some of it with you. Okay. Another, attending conferences and events. This is a perfect example, right? It's a virtual event. It's really hard at virtual, though. I mean, let's not kid each other. We can talk about how great, I have some great tactics on how to, work a virtual event. And there's a lot of my colleagues in the market that are doing that because, well, they have no choice, and that's what we're doing. But as COVID lifts or stabilizes, or whatever word we want to use, if you are going to sell to the government, you must attend regional and or national events. As an example, if you are in the architecture, engineering, or construction fields, you should be a member of SAME. If you are in technology, you should be a member of AFCEA, AFCEA. These are all national, global organizations. And you go to one of those conferences, you're going to meet 1,000 people or hundreds at a minimum. Now, that's not enough. You have to have the tactics and strategies of how do you work a conference? How do you position in a conference? I can go on and on, but bottom line, you need to attend these conferences and events. And oh, by the way, that's where you'll find a ton of teaming partners. Okay. Not just, and there are program managers and contracting officers at these events. If you go to a conference or an event, yes, the small business office normally has a table there, but you're really looking to find out if there are any folks from the program side that are on panels, that are giving sessions, right? You want to talk to them as well. Speaking of small business offices, you need to meet with the small business office. Now, I mentioned it yesterday. Small business offices are a microcosm of society. Some are good at what they do and others are not. That's a very nice way of putting it. Just like, some of us are really good at what we do. Some of us may not be. Microcosm of society. There are some small business offices, all they do is, yep, give me your CAPE statement. And if I see anything of value, I'll bring you in. Yeah. I mean, or we have videos and webinars and training and, you need to, come to this event or that event. That's fairly normal and it's valuable. However, there are some small business offices that literally will take you by the hand and walk you into a program manager's office so you can give a capability presentation. The example that I used yesterday, I'll use today. One of our clients, they had a meeting with the small business director for the National Science Foundation. She told them, you better not talk to anybody behind my back. You better not call the program manager. Everything goes through me. And they said, Josh, what do we do? And I said, you do what she told you to do. Don't go around her. But she did awesome. She took him in for a presentation, capabilities presentation, and then she facilitated a $4 million sole source. And she got the contract. So small business offices, you must check all of them. You need to talk to all of them. Those that provide you with value, ride them until you get every penny out of them. And those that just don't seem to really help, then you just move on. Okay. But absolutely engage them. Industry days. Now, this is going to be a wild one for some of you. Industry days are all virtual right now, right? However, when we get back to having industry days that are face-to-face, let's say, for example, here's the example. There is an opportunity that is going to release in 6 months. Okay. You've got it on your pipeline. You're tracking it. In 6 months, excuse me, you're planning on going after it, but you want to talk to the program manager. Contracting officer says, I'm not giving you any names. Okay. I will get in trouble if I start giving out the contact information for our folks. And that's fairly common. And so you say, okay, don't give me the name. What office is this coming out of? And they'll tell you, well, it's out of this division or this, section. Well, go into Beta Sam and find any opportunity that has an industry day within your NAICS code that is for this element, this unit, organization within the agency, etc. Get on a plane, don't stay overnight. For $150, fly into this industry day. You have no intent of bidding on this opportunity for this industry day, but you know the program team for the opportunity that you're going to engage in 6 months is sitting on a panel. And you sit outside that door and you wait for everything to be done and you go introduce yourself. Think about that. I'm using an industry day for an opportunity 6 months from now, simply to meet somebody face to face. Guys, that's business. We are pulling out all the stops. Okay. Cultivating your current customers, obviously, methods to influence. Building relationships. You want to influence pre-acquisition before something comes out on the street for bid? You need to build relationships. I mentioned yesterday, every one of your companies should have 3 strategic targets, right? And it's not simply department, it's not simply, Health and Human Services, U.S. Army, and Department of Commerce. If we said it was U.S. Army, specifically Corps of Engineers, and these 2 districts. But you have 3 strategic targets. You're not looking for the opportunities on these 3, not yet. You're simply, that these 3 buy more of what you sell throughout any given year, that you're going to target them. I'm going down a rabbit hole. You guys can see how, even though that we're here to talk sources saw it, I'm building all of this and integrating it. So you have 3 strategic targets. Go to events, have calls, do capability presentations through the small business office, get teaming partners, bunch of different pieces. And then a key one is sources sought. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So again, a lot of different ways to influence. We're only going to be formally talking about one of them today. Now, I ran through this yesterday. I'm not going to go in heavy detail, but I'm doing it to make a point. There are 3 core verticals for prospecting. If all you're doing is going into beta.sam, that's weak. If all you're doing is talking to your small business offices, looking at forecast, et cetera, that's weak. Strong, the core. If you do these 3, you're going to win contracts. 90% of our clients the last 13 years have won contracts simply because They follow these three core. You got to have a strong teaming strategy. You must engage the government outside of Beta SAM, and you must focus pre-acquisition. If you do those three, you will win contracts. Okay. Number three, that's how important source of SOTs are. That's how important they are. Okay. So let's talk source of SOT, purpose and objectives. Your objectives when responding to a source of SOT, there are three. You are to differentiate your company, marginalize or even destroy the ability for your competition to bid, and to influence the acquisition. Those are your three objectives in responding to a source of SOT. Most companies, probably many of you, if you've never heard me talk before, simply respond to the questions, right? Well, Josh, the source of SOT says the government is requiring that we provide these 6 items. Okay, we're going to be talking about what you provide and what you don't in a minute. But that's what most companies do, right? Oh, Josh, I've been told government, I've written proposals, you got to give the government what they're asking for. Okay. The problem is this provides you with very little value, and you don't provide the government with stuff that you don't want to provide them, and you don't have to answer all the questions. And we're going to talk more of that here in a minute. Why does the government do the research? They want to know if there's relevant experience. On a source of SOT, they want to know that there's enough small businesses that can actually do the work. And you can read the slide. I'm not going to go all the way through it. But it's critically important that you take advantage of source of SOT. Okay. As an example, should they release it full and open, small business, or another set aside, right? They may say we are planning to release this as a small business set aside, but let's say you're 8A or let's say you're woman owned. You should tell them, don't just release this as small. You need to release this as a small business set aside. We urge you to release it as small or woman owned, etc. When you look at the next codes, now those 2 next codes I'm pretty sure have the exact same dollar value. But let's say you've got you provide a product or service that is it's sold under 2 different next codes, right? In general, for whatever reason, contracting officers put them under 2 different codes because they're fairly similar. What if one of those codes is 25 million and the other code is 16.5 million? If your company is less than 16.5 million revenue average over 5 years, right? You sure don't want them to release it under the next code for 25 million. Most companies will say, yep, I've got that next code. It's in my SAM profile. I'm good to go. So I don't have to worry about that. Yes, you do. If in fact you could recommend a next code that has a lower volume that will eliminate all the other companies that are above 16.5 million, you have just barred entry to them competing on that opportunity. So, and I'm going to give you another example of the next code here in a little bit, but don't just look at next codes and go, yep, that's under my code. Try to influence the acquisition. Try to get another next code that is a lower threshold so that you're not competing against as many companies. I mean, it's not hard. You just have to think this way, right? Is the RFP going to be released under under GSA, another vehicle, full and open with an N? So you should be making those recommendations, right? This is the opportunity to influence before the RFP is released. Many sources most don't ask for your recommendations. You should never, ever respond to a source of SOT without recommending potential requirements to the government. Hey, government, based on our industry and based on our expertise, we haven't seen a lot of, there's been a lot of quality issues out there. So highly recommend that you give extra points, or you have all the contractors respond and talk about their quality program. Better yet, if they're ISO certified, and you'll only mention that if you are ISO certified, right? You're only going to make recommendations to the government based on what differentiates you, right? And again, we're going to go into examples when we close up here. So if as an example, now I'll get into the example here in a minute, but if your competition has a certain weakness and they are likely to be in the running to win the bid, if you know any of their weaknesses, talk about their weaknesses in your sources sought. Recommend to the government, talk to, how will you, resolve this issue or that issue? And now when that other company gets the RFP, they're going to be like, oh, for God's sakes, they must be talking about the problems we're having on our one contract over at that other agency, right? So you want to ghost the weaknesses of your competition as well. And again, I'm going to show you examples. Hang tight with me. And again, sources sought, the contracting officer will not share your response with other companies. They're not supposed to. And a sources sought can be used for a new opportunity or to refine an existing one. Okay. Now here's a foot stomp. Business intelligence. Most of us only think about market intelligence in one direction, right? You're collecting information from the government. You're collecting information from teaming partners. And you are using that as a part of your sales strategy. This session this afternoon is to teach you a concept called ghosting, okay? Ghosting requirements. When you ghost requirements, you are influencing an acquisition. You are attempting to impact their decision cycle. You're trying to influence their strategy, and you are putting requirements, recommendations, so that when they write the final RFP and they create that statement of work, maybe 2 of your 5 recommendations make their way in. Now, other companies, when they read the RFP, are going to go, this is wired for some company. Because this sounds like it was made for somebody. That's why we ghost in a sources sought. And I want you to be the company that gets it wired versus the company that goes, I can't bid. It's wired for somebody else. Now, my general comments on this: sources sought, best time to shape and ghost, or having meetings with the government, before an RFP hits the street. Also, totally off base or off topic, teaming agreements. And by the way, in our Q&A, if you don't know what a teaming agreement is specifically for federal or government sales, don't be bashful or embarrassed. Raise your hand. We'll talk about that towards the end during Q&A. But most of us know what teaming agreements are. Do not wait to do your teaming agreements until after, don't wait until after the RFP or the RFQ is released. That's the hardest time to build a team. As soon as a sources sought is released, you should have, tactically, you should go, okay, I can likely prime this, or I'm going to have to subcontract. If I'm going to prime, I'm going to start building my team right now. If I have to sub, I'm going to look for a prime right now. I want a TA signed before that RFP or RFQ drops. And guess what? Most of the really qualified quality companies out there, they're already going to be under teaming agreement when the RFP drops. That's how this market works. Okay. But nobody tells you that. I'm telling you, write that one down. If there is a pre-proposal conference or industry day, haven't been a whole bunch of these since COVID started, but they'll pick back up. You get to go on site and talk with the customer. Imagine if you were architecture, engineering, construction, you're going to do a site survey, right? You get to hear the questions that your competition's asking, right? You get information that's not in the RFP. So if there is a proposal conference and you have a team, one of you has to go. But if you're going to prime, you must attend. No ifs, ands, or buts. You spend the money, you go attend. Okay. That's how important those conferences can be. And that helps you, influence. Now that's post acquisition, obviously. That pre proposal conference, the RFP's already dropped, right? So that's acquisition phase. But there's a lot of market intelligence there. Now, and I say we because RSM Federal, it's about a dozen of us in the company. We're a small business, right? We can all be our worst enemy. How many times do you see a source of SOT and you go, you know what? I'm putting out a fire. I just don't have time today to respond to this source of SOT. And you know what? Plenty of other small companies are going to respond to the source of SOT, right? If I can't make it, it's not a big deal. That could not be further from the truth, okay? Every year, between 15 and 20 billion with a B, procurements, acquisitions are taken away from small business and given to large companies. Why? Because the government doesn't get two responses from small business. It could be an IT source of SOT, technology, and they're still not getting two. Do you have any idea how much 15, 20 billion is to the small business community? That is a ton of opportunities. Okay. So would you buy a car and not test drive it? The answer is no, of course not. So why would you consider bidding on an RFP and you purposely skip the source of SOT? That source of SOT is your car test drive. Because if you don't test drive, you have no business responding to the RFP. You can, but you failed to influence the acquisition. Therefore, you're not going to be very competitive. That's very blunt. That's very cold. But there's a mindset here that I want you to get into, right? The opportunity, it is either qualified or pre-qualified, or it's not. And you know that to successfully win in the federal market, you must influence the acquisition. I'm not saying you can't win contracts without influencing. Everybody does. A lot of folks do. But if you really want to grow your company and get a lot of contracts, you got to do the influence. Okay. Now, some of you, I'm too busy. Other companies respond, right? I'll deal with this when the RFP drops. And we just walk through that. But let me explain how this is going to work. The contracting officer is going to go, okay, I'm going to release this full and open. I'm going to put it on GSA schedule. I'm going to do it under this NAICS because my market research indicates there are no interested or capable small businesses interested in this procurement. Now, there is a rule of two. Two companies could respond to the source of SOT, but the government could go, yeah, no, neither of these companies look mature enough. I don't think either of them have the past performance to do it. I'm going to make a judgment call and go, nope, we do not have qualified small businesses. And now it's full and open, and so, and you may not have past performance under the NAICS code they're looking for. You may not have a GSA schedule. And even if you have a schedule, now you're competing with larger companies. If you had simply responded to the source of SOT in an attempt to not just answer the questions, but influence that acquisition, right? They may have released it woman-owned small or 8A. They may have put it on GSA schedule, but because now it's under a certain SIN, not a NAICS code, but a SIN, special item number, the number of companies able to bid it is just going to be so much smaller. So crazy important. And if you say, well, here, let me just put it this way. You never send in a source of SOT without it being tailored and without, tailored to your company and your capabilities, your strengths, competitions, weaknesses. But if you have no time, then dust off a template and in 20 minutes, put a real quick source of SOT response together and just fire it off. Okay. But you don't want to make a practice of that, but you absolutely want to respond if it's within your wheelhouse. Okay. Now, how you approach a source of SOT baseline, they're either going to give you a ton of guidance or a little guidance or a ton of guidance, right? It's normally one or the other. They will often say, page limit or size. I will tell you right now, if you go over the page limit or the size limit, they are likely still going to accept your response. Okay, that's number one. We're going to talk about more from a regulation perspective, what you can't do. Excuse me. Make sure you have business sensitive on everything. Anything that goes out your door should have business sensitive on it. Okay, make sure you've got that. You're not going to get the response back. They may not even confirm receipt. If they do, by the way, even if they do confirm receipt, you always call the following day after you submit a source of SOT to verify that it was received. Why? Because you want to collect intelligence. You want to collect market intelligence. And they may go, well, Josh, I sent you an email yesterday after you sent me. I confirmed receipt. And I go, oh, I didn't see it. Oh, I haven't gotten to it yet. Hey, when do you anticipate this is going to be coming out? Do you have an acquisition cycle outline for this yet? A timeline? Collect intelligence. What good is responding to a source of SOT if you don't know when that RFP is going to drop? And why not? Oh, I had it. My brain moves fast. Confirm receipt. When's the acquisition? Yeah, it'll come back to me, I'm sure, after I move on. Okay. Normally you have to monitor for the, that's it. Ask the contracting officer that you that you just submitted your response to. Are you going to post the RFP to Beta SAM? Are you going to keep the same solicitation number? I can't tell you how many RFPs drop following a source of SOT, and they're two different numbers, and then you completely miss the RFP. As contracting officer, are you going to email all of us that responded to the source of SOT and let us know that the RFP is out there? If you don't do these follow-ups, a majority of your source of SOTs, you're going to miss the opportunities. Congratulations for finding a source of SOT, but you didn't get to bid on it. Okay. And then read the fine print. Some will say, yes, they will only go to those doing source of SOT. That's less and less now, but it has happened. These are what the two look like. The one on the left, this is pretty much it. Hey, give me your point of contact. Tell me if you have a status. Do you have any vehicles? This one doesn't even ask for past performance, right? Or it is this 20-page massive data collection. And I will tell you, nothing irritates me more than contracting officers that send out these 20-page, 15, 10-page massive data collection pieces that also include rough orders of magnitude. Hey, can you give me a general, idea of pricing? We are doing the contract. This is like you're doing a minor proposal. This, and by the way, they don't even have to put this out for bid. This is just a pet peeve of mine. But anyway, you've got two, either a little bit or a lot. Okay. Now the government's going to ask you for a lot of stuff. Even if they don't, you're going to include it anyway. You need to give a narrative summary of your company, right? Your capacity to perform. Capability statement, make sure it's tailored for this opportunity. Even if they don't ask about teaming, the government likes teaming, okay? So if you do plan on teaming, maybe you already know the two companies you're going to work with that'll sub to you. Talk about it. It makes you more mature, perceptually more mature. Talk about how long you've done, provided those products or services. I can't tell you how many source of SOTs don't ask for past performance. Now I scratch my head at that. because that's one of the number one ways that anyone, contracting officer, program manager, teaming partner, can say, yep, they have the breadth and depth of capability to support these requirements. So yes, always talk about your past performance within your source of SOT response. Okay. And then obviously your acquisition, if you want to change the next code, you want to have a certain set aside, use a certain vehicle. Now, that rough order of magnitude, let me make sure here. Yep, we'll come back to that in a minute. All right, big foot stomp. You do not have to answer every question in a source of SOT. It doesn't matter how important those questions look. Unlike an RFP, an RFQ, a solicitation, source of SOT requirements do not fall under the same federal. Source of SOT is identified in the FAR, in the Federal Acquisition Regulation, or even the DFAR on defense side. But there is nothing in the FAR that says you are going to be non-responsive if you do not answer every question. In other words, you should not be answering every question if it is not in your best interest to do so. Okay. You are responding to do two things. You are going to confirm the strategy, and then you're going to ghost recommendations, or you're going to change their strategy and you're still going to ghost recommendations. We're almost to the point where we're going to talk ghosting, and you'll see those examples. This is a source of SOT. You're not going to win anything. There's no money to be made on this. Government can't hold you to it. If they ask you for rough order of magnitude, your pricing can be wrong. Totally wrong. You can't be held to it. You cannot be held to it. This is a pre-acquisition marketing mechanism, research mechanism. Now, I'm going to give you a recommendation on rough orders of magnitude. I have given this recommendation many times. Contracting officers, actual active government contracting officers, often come up to me at regional national events and go, I hate the recommendation you gave on rough order of magnitude, but it makes total perfect sense from a business perspective, and they respect it. Never give an accurate ROM to the government in a source of SOT. Be very clear in a source of SOT, okay? Pre-acquisition. The reason why you never give a rough order of magnitude is because what if they're trying to do small business and they get two responses with ROMs, and what they are planning to budget for this, those ROMs are both too high. That will immediately allow that contracting officer to go, you know what? Small business can do it, but not at the pricing and the levels that we need. We're going to make it full and open. And now you're competing against the big boys. What I always say is take 75% of your ROM, and that's the number you give. Okay. Again, government hates this recommendation. The government, right? They want everything that you have, and rightfully so. And we are supposed to be partners, right? There's supposed to be a partnership between government and industry. They want everything you have. But if it's not in your best interest to answer it, then you don't answer. You don't explain. You don't leave a number 3 period with an NA. You just don't answer. Okay. It's just a research tool to influence. Okay. Now here's the other real big foot stomp. Jenny, I'm going to go over again. I apologize profusely. Not profusely, because you know I really don't mean that. But anyway, so if you miss the response date to a source of SOT, you can still respond. It amazes me. Look, folks, there is nothing in the regulations that say a contracting officer cannot accept a response to a source of SOT after the suspense date. They simply put a suspense date out there because that's how they're managing their research. 1, 2, 3, even 4 weeks. 90% of the time, contracting officers will simply email you back and go, thank you, got it, and they'll use it. So unlike an RFP or an RFQ and you're writing a proposal, if you see a source of SOT a week after it was already supposed to be responded to, and you're like, ah, I missed that response. If it's within a month, go for it. And the majority of the time, the contracting officer is simply going to say, thank you. And you're in. Okay. See, little things like that, people go, really? Yeah, really. Now, I'm going to skip that. We're going to go straight to ghosting. Ghosting is influencing. It's a process of influencing requirements for an acquisition, which are your strengths or competition's weaknesses. I'm going to teach you how to do that with several examples. Okay. It's going to marginalize your competition, decrease their effectiveness, gives you competitive advantage, right? And you're recommending information that you hope gets into the RFP. When I said we were going to talk some advanced stuff today, this is what I'm talking about. Okay. You can ghost anything, whether it's the size of the acquisition, the socioeconomic status, the codes, the vehicles, your strengths, anything that differentiates you, you can ghost. So as an example, for some of you who may have a facility clearance, right? An FCL. Here's an example of a company that has a top secret one. And they want to make sure that the solicitation requires that the prime have a facility clearance. And so, and I'll read it because part of this is tone of voice. Hey, we recommend the government change the facility clearance from secret to top secret, because the sources sought in this case said, hey, we're probably going to require a secret FCL. Well, that's a lot of companies. A lot fewer have TS facility clearances. And so, hey, this project based on supporting a secret network, but the potential touch points with the agency's TS networks, at least from a data perspective, will more than likely be required. This will ensure that the government is also not required to expend a whole bunch of internal resources or forced to acquire more contractors if the situation occurs. You are simply attempting to say, hey, government, doesn't this make sense? This is influencing. This is ghosting. And if the government were to release this as a requiring not a secret, but now a top secret, you're going to be so excited. Okay. Now, most of you probably don't have facility clearances here, but some of you do. And so that can apply. What about certifications? Whether it's CMMI level 2 or 3 from a technology perspective, or based on whatever your industry is, maybe you have certain, maybe it's going to be for a program management requirement. And you are PMI certified, PMP certified, right? Recommend those if it applies. Because what you're doing is you're hoping that you say, hey, look, this is going to you want the maturity of vendors. Highly recommend that you require these certifications. Now, if that makes it into the RFP, you've just barred entry to everyone that doesn't formally have that certification. Okay. Another example. Let's say you are a security company. Okay. Physical security, like cameras and intrusion detection and access control. This example here, I'm not going to read through the whole thing. This example, based on the sources sought, the government has a couple of buildings that require new security systems. Well, this company here has a past performance in the commercial space where they supported 3 different buildings geographically dispersed, right, with 5,000 employees. And you're saying, you know what? Apps, if you don't ask for a past performance that supports at least 2 interconnected buildings with integrated security, you're likely going to run into problems. Now, what is this company trying to do? This company knows there's a ton of mom and pop small security companies out there that have done onesie twosie buildings. This office, this one building. This is for multiple buildings. The sources saw it. if they convince the government, hey, we are looking for past performance where you have integrated at least 2 buildings. If that goes in, guess what? All those smaller companies that don't have the level of past performance that your company has is out in the dark. Okay. So if you look at these 3, we're taking something that is a differentiator for us, something that's maybe past performance at a volume, at a level that we know a lot of smaller or other companies don't have. Tell the government this is what they need. Another example, let's say you have a really strong QA process. Recommend it. Recommend it. Now, here's a great one. This is a really good one to finish with. Let's say you have a GSA schedule, or you have a GSA schedule, and the source of sought doesn't even mention it. Say, hey, look, we recommend you move the acquisition, or you maintain a GSA schedule, but we recommend, boy, I got some old data in here. It's all mass now and it's not OO core. But anyway, we recommend you modify it to release it via this SIN, SIN, special item number under GSA's mass, right? Well, if that SIN has a lot fewer companies on it than another SIN on your schedule, don't you want to compete against less companies? Right? So convince, say, hey, look, you really should put it under this SIN. Now, many of you are going, I don't have a schedule, so there's nothing I can do. Yeah, there is. You say, hey, we recommend that the acquisition be open market, right? And why? Because the industry's made a major shift in the last 15 months. This is total positioning, people. Our industry has really moved and we've shifted. And if you just do it on schedule, most of those companies will not have moved towards these new industry practices. What you're saying is, yeah, don't put it on schedule. You're unlikely to get enough positive bids. You should do this. And so, if imagine this was in your source of sought response. Hey, look, in addition to responding, provide feedback. Industry's made major shifts last 15 months, right? Releasing under GSA schedule is not necessarily going to guarantee, right, that you're positioning for the follow-on acquisition. And if you do it outside of GSA, you're likely going to save upwards of 35%, decrease headcount, blah, blah, blah. And you write them all in. And so you can also do this by email. You can also put this into email instead of just source of sought response. Now I'm going to move really fast here because we're running out of time. You will have these slides. Jenny will help me upload them after the session. But here's an example source of sought response, right? The company capabilities. Here's our team. And then you're going to have a section for recommendations in every single source of sought response that is specifically tailored. Your differentiated past performance directly mapped to the requirements. Recommendation 3, acquisition strategy. Okay. So we talked acquisition pre-act today. We talked your objectives. You don't have to answer every question. You can turn it in after the due date, and you always ghost and make recommendations. Before we go into Q&A, and Jenny cuts me off at the knees. Number 1, if you're a podcast person, Mike and I run the Game Changers podcast. It's out there everywhere. Just search for Game Changers. Everything I talked about today about ghosting, step-by-step strategies are in the Insider's Guidebook. The Insider's Guide Winning Contracts, that has the process of how to ghost even more than what I talked today. And these are some other good books. Finally, I want to thank all of you for sticking around with me at the end of the day. And if you want examples of proposals, sources, soughts, hundreds of other templates and strategies, as a thank you for attending this conference, we're giving 50% off that first month. It's $29 to gain access to all that stuff. So because I know Jenny's going to take the screen down, code is GovCon 2021, and that'll get you the discount. And with that, before we go into Q&A, Jenny, and you help me, thank you all for being here today. And I hope you learned at least something new.
Oh my gosh, that is so much information. And there's so many comments in the chat about this is so practical, game changing. And that's why we had to put this together, because when companies would come to me and say, I need to get DCA compliant, and I'd say, what's your revenue? Well, we don't have any yet. I'm like, well, I can't solve your problem, but my job is to find you somebody that can. And that's why I've been teamed up with Josh Frank and Michael Lejeune, because sales strategy, business sales strategy, what they're saying can be applied in a different way, and you will be in the winner circle instead of over on the right-hand side with all the losers, right, Josh?
Yes, and I was reading the comments as you were talking there, and I saw Josh for president, and somebody likes my shirt, but yeah, I'm exhausted. This is one of those crazy intensive sessions, and I know we're going a little late today. If you have questions after this and you don't get them here during our Q&A, just email me, contact at rsmfederal.com, and or get with Jenny. She'll connect me. So do we have any questions, Jenny?
Well, there were people that were making comments as they went along. And I think most of them are just saying, hey, excellent advice. This information is game changing. Great session as always, Josh for you got a Josh for second president and a second. I feel like the main thing that we are letting people see is you don't have to play the game the same way as everybody else. And that if you're doing something different, it really makes a difference. And I know that people have talked about RFIs and sources sought, and I guess an RFI and a sources sought is the same thing.
Yeah, they're different. I mean, put it this way, it's getting better. They are in fact two separate types of research mechanisms and tools. RFI is for large and small companies. Sources sought is for small, right? So they are different. Again, the RFI is normally used by an agency or a command for a product or a service, something along those lines, that's sort of new to the organization. They haven't deployed that before. They haven't executed it before. That's more of an RFI. Sources sought is, are there enough small businesses that can do the work at competitive price points? And that's it. So some will use them interchangeably, but yeah, I want to make sure we all understand there's a clear delta between the two.
Okay, well, that's good to know. The other thing that somebody said, and I think this is also in Michael's presentation, is you have to have teammates, and you also have people that you have a relationship with, even though you consider them competitors, because they're not going to set something aside for women-owned small business if they can't get a couple versions of women-owned small businesses responding. Now, you may not win, and that's okay, but it's almost like make it a part of your regular process to go through and take these steps. And I think that's what's been so valuable about everything you've talked about, Josh. And of course, my favorite slide is the one with the stoplights on
it. That's everybody's favorite slide. Yeah, the
That's
prospecting
right.
methods. David asked, what do you think about, talking about your teammates in your sources sought response? The answer is, I wouldn't hesitate, right? And by the way, just because you respond to a sources sought doesn't mean that you're going to prime. I can't tell you how many times goes back a long ways, but even if I knew I was going to have to subcontract to another company, I would talk with that company and I'd be like, hey, you priming? I want to be on your team. They'd be, yep. And I say, you respond to that sources sought? And they go, yep. And I go, I am too. Even though I have no desire and no intent of priming, I want to make sure another response from a small business goes in order to influence that acquisition so that I'm on that team and they're able to compete. I see no reason why most contracting officers are not going to be, oh, this company's on the team. I wonder if maybe we should be talking to them separately or something along those lines. No, I wouldn't hesitate, David. Not at all. I would list your team out. It's going to do nothing but make you look more mature.
Well, and they'll remember, hey, we got a response from them. They're not going to remember specifics a lot of the time, but it's like, okay, we got 6 responses. I can go in the meeting and say we saved 6, and the boss is going to say we're going to go with that. And
Well,
that's
yeah,
what you're looking for.
In addition, I want you to imagine it's not unheard of. There, a source of SOT response goes in, and there's 4 subcontractors. I mean, literally, this is how companies that properly prepare in the federal space, they don't just look at the source of SOT. They go, okay, based on this source of SOT, we can probably do about 50% of the work, and we're going to need 4 other companies to likely do the rest of all these pieces. Just because there are 5 companies within, this is our teaming, this is the team we've built for when the RFP drops, there is nothing. If you don't have teaming agreements signed with those 5 other 4 companies, nothing to stop you from changing one or all of them out before you respond to the RFP. Right? This is sort of gamesmanship at this point.
Well, I don't ever want to be in a sword fight with you, Josh, because I would die.
You crack me up, Jenny. I love you.
Well, you called us
You're
the 6
awesome.
Musketeers yesterday. I thought that was super funny.
Yep, 6 Musketeers.
I can't wait to see the capes and the hats and the, everything. So
only you would come up with that. Only you. So, again, we've got a small group left here. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And Jenny, I will get you the slides as soon as we get off here.
All right. Sounds great. I will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks so much for being on with us, and looking forward to seeing what else gets created out of this event.